Welcome on into another episode of BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. We got a big one coming up on Sunday, the Bills and the Chiefs, a primetime matchup on not just the Bills schedule, but the NFL calendar all around. I'm Josh Reed alongside Carl Jones, Ryan Talbot, and Matt Parrino. Matt, let's start with you and kind of work around the horn here. You look at these two teams, and you would think maybe at this point of the season, they'd both have maybe one loss, and they'd both be just kind of cruising into this game. But that has not been the case so far this season for either team.
Yeah, and it's so funny because at different points of the season, about a month apart, the narrative around these two teams is that something is seriously wrong. You go back to the early part of the season, and we forget about that a little bit now because the Chiefs have been kind of a wagon over the last month. But, the Chargers come out hot, the Denver Broncos, and they haven't been in first place in their division all season long. And this is uncharted territory for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, they look a lot better, but at 5-3, what sets up this weekend with this matchup is if the Bills win and they go down to 5-4 and you have the Broncos still 2 games to play against them in your division, if you're Kansas City, we could be talking about a completely new complexion of the AFC playoffs. And for the Bills, a loss this week with the easy schedule in New England, there seems to be, even despite the way that this season has gone for both these teams, so much riding on this game, Ryan, on Sunday.
Yeah, usually when we're talking about this game, we're talking about the importance of the 1 seed in the AFC for both teams. And we're talking now about staying in the race in their own divisions. We're talking about how, like you just said, if the Bills lose this game, they're suddenly looking up at a Patriots team that has a very soft schedule, and they're taking care of their own business here week in, week out. The Denver Broncos, as good as they've been, I don't know if they can keep this going. So the Chiefs, as you've mentioned, have looked great since Rashee Rice has come back. They have all their receivers. I know they're going to be without Isaiah Pacheco for a little bit, but for the most part, they're trending in the right direction injury-wise. The Bills are still trending in that not so great territory. So it's really going to be interesting to see how these two match up on Sunday.
Usually when these two teams match up, the first thing we talk about is Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen, and rightfully so. Those are two of the best quarterbacks and players on planet Earth. But it's different this time around, not saying those two players aren't having great years, but the running game with James Cook and the Bills' offensive line has been so superb this year. And then Patrick Mahomes is probably the leading candidate for the MVP. But on their side of the ball, Rashee Rice comes back, and he's playing like a gangbuster. Xavier Worthy's having a great year. Travis Kelce almost puts up 100 yards. It's just funny how the narrative throughout all the different chapters of this rivalry shifts every single year.
Yeah, it's the conversation about the Bills' passing game is one that isn't going to go away anytime soon, Matt, until they figure it out. And whether that's, Joe Brady figuring it out on his side of things and the scheme part of this puzzle, piece to this puzzle, or if it's Josh Allen finally just catching a heater. We've seen him do it throughout his career where a couple of down weeks and then he just catches fire, and it seems like there isn't a pass on the football field against any defense. You could put 13, 14 guys out there, and he'll find a way to complete it. Man, do they need that type of game out of him against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, because the way the Bills' defense is played, maybe not last week against Andy Dalton, but they're going to need some points in this one.
Doesn't it feel like a little bit that the Bills are experiencing a little bit of an identity crisis because you have this all-world quarterback who could throw it to any part of the field at any given time. The highlights over the last 5 years from Josh Allen are amongst the greatest maybe of all time as a passer. And you've basically changed who you are into this dominant bullying run team that wants to get heavy personnel packages out in the field. You want your wide receivers to be nasty and physical in the run game. And to Tyrell Shaver's credit, Keon Coleman's credit, Shakir even, these guys are some of the best blocking wide receivers in the NFL if you just go at the results of this running game through 7 games. And I don't ever want to take away from what they've become with James Cook, but to be able to then pivot to some of this down the field efficiency that we've seen from Josh Allen at times over his career, I don't know if they have the personnel to do that. And when they go into those groupings, it puts like 11 personnel when they spread and they go out there with 4 wide receivers and maybe throw a running back or Dalton Kincaid, now you have a collection of players where it puts a lot of pressure on a Keon Coleman, puts a lot of pressure on Joe Brady with no Joshua Palmer, who's supposed to be the guy that separates and can beat man coverage, to now design those packages for being successful when you're not really doing that at a super high clip. Even last week, I agree with Joe Brady's point. They didn't need to pass the ball. And so when you're in that game and having the success with the run game, I almost wonder if that's limiting the creativity at times of how he's deploying some of these weapons in the passing game, if that's ultimately affecting Josh Allen and the efficiency of the downfield passing game, Ryan.
Yeah, it's funny. We sat here and we heard from Sean McDermott, followed by both coordinators, and it almost sounds like McDermott and Brady aren't on the same page. Brady's saying the passing attack is fine, and you look at the results, against Carolina, he's right. They didn't need to pass. That's fine. But what about against Atlanta and against New England? The struggles have really been there. Then before that, you have Sean McDermott say, hey, we need to be two-dimensional. And it's funny. We've had that conversation before with McDermott, but that was years ago when they couldn't get the run game going. Now they're sitting here with the reigning MVP, and they're having these passing game struggles. The Bills do need to kind of figure out what are the best personnel packages that work for both the run and the pass, because you're right. With these heavy packages, James Cook is having a field day, but we're also seeing the struggles of what these blocking wide receivers are doing or not doing so much in the passing game.
Carl, I am going to say a sentence right now that I never thought I would utter. Defenses are going to need to game plan for James Cook and to stop him and not stop Josh Allen. That's the way this offense is going right now.
And I think that's fair to say, considering that the pendulum has now completely swung from that Daboll era where it was more air raid, but there was more variance, right? Where Josh Allen was prone to turn the ball over a little bit more, and they couldn't run the rock and insert Joe Brady and a more ball control style offense. They're not turning over the ball as much, but the problem is there is little room for error when you run the ball and you don't have many weapons on the outside to air the ball down the field in an explosive manner. So, yes, if you're a defensive coordinator, if I'm going to go up against the Buffalo Bills, we have to make sure that we establish the line of scrimmage, obviously, but we have to stop Cook. If we can do that, and we're going to one-on-one on the outside, I'm not fearful of Tyrell Shavers. I'm not fearful of Keon Coleman. Khalil Shakir is a great guy, but he's not going to make me change my game plan, right? That is such an odd statement considering that Josh Allen was the most valuable player in football last year, and we're talking about him like no disrespect, Dylan Gabriel type of game plan. Hey, dink and dump and make sure you get the guy in the flat and ask Khalil Shakir to turn a 4-yard gain into 50. It's just so wild considering that Josh Allen is this dynamic, fantastic quarterback, and it's more so of a let's just not make mistakes on offense type of deal.
Carl, I want to come right back to you. The Chiefs run a lot of man-to-man, right? So what's the answer? In order to get the passing game going, what is the Bills' answer to that? Do they have an answer?
Well, I mean, the obvious one is more meshing and cross routes because it kind of rubs off of defenders and things of that nature. Think of the Curtis Samuel touchdown last year. That was a mesh concept that beats man-to-man coverage. You're going to have to go deep in your bag and get creative, and Joe Brady is going to have to do that this week because they don't have the guys to win one-on-one. Now, one thing they do have at their advantage, this Chiefs defense doesn't have the best pass rush. Chris Jones is phenomenal. He's still playing great, but outside of him, I'm not really too threatened by anyone else. So Josh Allen's going to have time. But like we saw in that 16-yard sack in the first half, he had time that day too, and no one was still going open. So it's going to be up to Joe Brady to figure out ways to get his guys involved.
Max Hairston makes his NFL debut against the Panthers, Matt. I thought he did a pretty good job. Obviously, he was rotating in and out with Tre'Davious White. Look, it's one thing to go out there and look to match up and look back there at quarterback and see Andy Dalton. It's a whole different world when it's Patrick Mahomes back there.
It definitely is, but I think like having his speed be a part of what you're doing is exciting, and I think at least gives you a little bit more hope in some of these matchups on the outside. And even, there's going to be probably times where he gets matched up against a bunch of these different receivers that have different skill sets. The speed of Xavier Worthy, the elusiveness of a Marquise Brown, the just unbelievable full package that Rashee Rice brings to the table and how much he's changed that offense already. I just think that you get a lot more excited about just the sheer characteristics that Maxwell Hairston brings compared to Tre'Davious White, who, to his credit, has done a really good job of keeping the ship, going forward and floating and doing his job when he's out there. He played, I think, 65-ish% of the snaps compared to 35 for Hairston, somewhere around that share. I expect that to get a lot more tight this week with Hairston maybe playing an equal amount, maybe even more than Trey White against the Chiefs because of the weaponry that they have at receiver.
Ryan, I've been sitting here going back to training camp, and I know that you guys were sick of hearing me say it, but I was like, Michael Hoyt he's gonna make a little bit of a difference. Thank you, Michael Hoyt, for making me look smart, at least for 1 week, because man, he did make a big difference on that side of the ball.
Yeah, massive difference. And the versatility is what makes him so intriguing. You can see what he can do off the edge. You can kick him to the inside now on obvious pass rush downs, which that's going to be a major benefit for this team considering Ed Oliver's injury, and you want to be able to get that rush in the middle of the defense. He can drop into coverage. He was a one-man wrecking crew against Carolina. And I know that a lot of the defensive linemen fared well in that matchup, but 6 pressures in that game. He was flying around the field. He did not look like someone that had just sat out 6 weeks. There was no rust. He was ready to go, and he's going to mean a lot to this defense in the middle of the season and through the home stretch.
Talk about Max Hairston being back in the lineup, Michael Hoyt being back in the lineup, but Carl, and Ryan alluded to it right there a little bit. No Ed Oliver. I mean, that opens up a big hole, a massive hole right in the middle of the defensive line. What are the adjustments that they can make in order to make up and fill in those shoes outside of maybe the trade deadline?
Well, I think on first and second down, there's not much you can really do because Michael Hoyt can't play in the interior on first and second down. But on third down, move him in there a little bit to help out that interior pass rush on obvious passing downs.
Guys, this was great stuff. We have a special guest for this episode. Matt and I had a chance to check in with Hall of Famer Bill Cowher. He shared some thoughts on the upcoming matchup between the Bills and the Chiefs. Coach Cowher, thanks so much for taking some time out and hanging out with Matt and I here. It's good to have you coming back. You and the NFL Today on CBS crew coming back to Orchard Park, going to be outside of Highmark Stadium for the big game coming up on Sunday. The last time you were here, you got Bills Mafia fired up. You took the jacket off. You jumped through the table. Should we expect the same type of action coming up Sunday?
Well, I don't know if we'll be jumping through tables, but we'll definitely do something that's appropriate for the Buffalo Mafia, some of the traditional things that we've seen from them. But I think this coming back up there is interesting because last year, for the first time, we did that, and it received so well from around the country. Just to be able to be in that parking lot, to feel that energy, to feel that intensity, and the backing and the people and everything. So we kind of taken it on the road now. From there on, we've gone there, but it's always great to come back to Buffalo. And again, one of the greatest fan bases in the National Football League.
Bill, if you think about this rivalry, it's really become one of the best, not only in football, but in professional sports. When you think about watching a Chiefs-Bills game, like what goes through your mind, like going through the week preparing for it?
Well, I mean, it's Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, I think that is clearly what you're looking at from that perspective. And you're looking at two teams who have also dominated their respective divisions. And I think it's interesting in this one as we come into this game. I don't know if they've ever come into the game with at least one of them not being at the top of their division, but both these teams now are finding themselves fighting within their divisions to win it. You know, certainly with New England, what they've done in the early start of this season, Denver and the LA Chargers, what they've done now for Kansas City, the start that Kansas City got off of 0-2, then Buffalo losing a couple in a row, now them coming back from the bye week. It really has been a little bit, I would say, of an up and down with both these teams going into this game. So I think it's a very significant game from the standpoint of the barometer for both of these teams. Where are they respectfully? I know there's a lot of football left to be played. Certainly this is an important game because, as I said, the battle for their divisions. But when you think about these two games and these two teams, we always think about the fact that it's a Buffalo in the regular season. It's been Kansas City in the postseason. But right now they want to get to the postseason. So I think it's the big game for both these teams and trying to kind of make sure they solidify their dominance in their respective divisions and just continue to be who they are. But there's no question these are led by the two guys that lead them, that being Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes.
Bill, the Bills defense is coming off one of their best games of the season, probably their best game against Carolina. Yeah. Sean was seen during the game a couple different times, a lot more active on the headset, and it started to raise some questions. Maybe he was a little more involved in the play calling on that side of the ball. Of course, they've got a young defensive coordinator in Bobby Babich. He was asked after the game, and Sean said, look, we worked together on this defense, and we're going to continue that. But I guess I want to ask you, as a Hall of Fame head coach, have you ever been in a situation during a season where either A, as the head coach, you had to kind of get a little more involved, or B, as an assistant, where you had to kind of give up a little bit of something? And how do you walk that line?
Yeah, I've gotten to know Sean quite a bit just down through the years and spent some time in the off seasons and past seasons just talking with him about that degree of delegation, which is basically what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have that input, and you have to be able to interject at times on both sides of the ball, to me, as the head coach. Whether that be more of an emphasis on running the ball, maybe exploiting a certain person more, getting them more touches. On the other side of the ball, is it pressure? Is it dropping? What can we do to minimize some of the flaws that we may have at this point? So I'm sure that he's involved. I know that I got involved, and I think it's okay from the outside looking in to interject. I know when offense was out there, I was talking to Dick LeBeau on the defensive side of the ball. When the defense was out there, I was talking to Ken Wisenhunt on the offensive side of the ball, making sure we don't forget about some of the things we had discussed the day before, leading up to this, or some of the adjustments we may want to make. We're having trouble blocking a certain individual. What are we going to do? We're going to have to chip him. We can't run this guy to run the ball more. Okay, we may have to bring another safety into the box. We can't get home right now, the four-man pressure. Let's start mixing up some of the blitzes. So I think there's an ongoing flow to a game. I think Sean's got a great feel for that. I think as you see him on the sidelines, I would be surprised if he wasn't interjecting. So I love the fact, I think we're kind of built a lot of the same ways. And I think when you're going against Andy Reid, he was with Andy for 10 years in Philadelphia. And Andy's got Steve Spagnuolo, and now he's got Brady running the offense. So he's going to be involved on his side of the ball because he understands that's where his expertise is. He's probably more involved with that. And it's letting Bobby do his thing, but also just reminded him of the things that we had discussed through the course of the week that we want to do. Listen, this Kansas City team is, they're good right now. They got all the pieces right there. Rasheed Rice is back. Xavier Worthy's back. Hollywood Brown. And what does that do? It opens up for Travis Kelce. And they're also back to running the football right now. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt. So they're a very balanced football team. They're probably playing their best football of the season right now. So this will be a big challenge for them. But I love what they did last week. They got James Cook. I mean, I looked in there. I see Josh Allen had like less than 20 attempts throwing the football. That's a good recipe. We know what Josh Allen can do in the fourth quarter, just like Patrick Mahomes. If they need to take the game over, they have shown the ability to take games over. But it's okay to develop the other elements of your team along the way. And I think both these teams are kind of getting a feel for doing that.
Bill, I was so excited for this conversation because I think there's nobody better to ask this question to you than someone like you who knows what it takes to build a program that has sustained success. And I think, although they haven't gotten to the Super Bowl yet, Sean and his group here, Brandon Beane in the front office, they've built that. Now, there's a segment of the fan base that I think is panicking over, not getting over the hump and this idea of wasting Josh Allen's prime years. And when is it time to maybe turn the page? I wanted to ask you, what would you say are the symptoms in an organization when that decision maybe really needs to be discussed? And have you seen any of that with what's transpired in Buffalo under Sean and Brandon?
No, I think his success is what his sustained success, that being Sean McDermott, is foolish to even talk about that. And I think the biggest thing I'll say about this with Sean McDermott and knowing him, and also with Brandon and with, Terry, Pagula, I know that whole organization very well. They're open-minded. They're sitting there doing whatever they think they can do to tweak and to continue to make little changes along the way. And that's what you've got to continually do. Sometimes it's making tough decisions in regards to coaches. Maybe time it's tough decisions in regards to not extending a certain player and trying to tweak that. I love the fact I know that Josh has got some input into what he's doing. as he should. He's earned the right to do that. I know that there's open ears with Brandon, with Sean, and with Terry. Like, and what can we do to make this football team better? And I think they're constantly trying to do it. You go out and get the Nick Bosa. He's out there right now to try to upgrade that pass rush. Losing that Oliver is going to be that's going to be a tough thing to overcome. So sometimes you become a victim of your own success because you know what? You get there. There's a lot of people who don't even get there. And that sometimes you got to keep banging on the wall. I just will say this. I was that guy. I couldn't win a big one. I won my first Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers 14 years in. I'm not saying it's going to take Sean 14 years. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that you just keep knocking on that door. He knows how to push the right buttons. Brandon knows how to bring in the right pieces. One of these days, it's going to just mesh. And sometimes you may feel that you're at the deepest, as we were the year we won it, 7-2 to go to 7-5. Everyone says, "Here we go again, another collapse." And sometimes it's those moments of depths and despair that you reach the heights of all of a sudden the elation of achieving the ultimate. So sometimes it's that ride, that roller coaster, the ebb and flow that you go through. It builds you. It makes you more resilient, hardened to say the least. And so I think this football team, and I say to the fans up there, you've got great leadership. You've got some great players, and you're a great fan base. Just enjoy the ride that you're going on right now. Don't be impatient. It'll come probably a lot sooner than later.
Bill, you kind of mentioned Ed Oliver, the injury there, some of the other pieces that have been in and out of the lineup. Every fan, almost every fan of the Bills is going, hey, we need to trade for this before the deadline. Safety and cornerback and defensive tackle and linebacker and receiver. They want a whole new roster after the trade deadline. As a former head coach, when the trade deadline rolled around, when you were on that sideline and you were having discussions with the front office, when you did pull the trigger on moves, how difficult was it to get a guy and blend them in with everything that you've already established kind of at the midway point of the season?
Well, to be quite honest with you, Josh, it wasn't like it was when I was coaching. The trade deadline wasn't as, I would say, active as it is today. It was a lot shorter period of time. I think it was already been passed. They've extended it now because all of a sudden now you're going to find yourself, okay, we're halfway through the season. We don't have an Ed Oliver. You know, we need a receiver, a second receiver, whatever it may be. But I think the biggest thing is if you have the right culture, if you can get the right piece. But just understand when someone's out there, the team you have is the team you're going to win or lose with. Not one player is going to make that dramatic of a difference. And is it really worth giving up that one? Whatever you have to get that one player that would make a difference. And if he makes that great a difference, why is he not staying with the team he was at? So, I just think it's the cases you can add depth, and particularly at times, and guys can come in and they can be instrumental to give you some depth, and maybe that's what you may need going down the stretch. But I think, again, you're not going to sacrifice the future or sacrifice anything. This is your team. And you're going to make sure you develop the depth of your team because you're going to have to get people to step in for Ed Oliver. It may mean we change or list some things, Bobby Babbage, schematically to make up for that loss right there. A little bit more 8-man front. Maybe we got to get a little more pressure to make up for some of what we lost with that guy who was pretty disruptive right there. So you have to be able to adapt and adjust as the season's going along, and all the great teams are able to do that. And I think Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbage will figure out a way to make up for a lack of Ed Oliver.
Bill, the parity in the AFC this year, I think, makes the playoffs even more intriguing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sitting here talking about the Chiefs and Bills being wild card teams at this point.
Yeah.
What do you make of this new look AFC? Obviously, with the Colts having this unbelievable season, and who do you think, like at the end of this thing, are going to be the teams that really have something to say when teams are vying for that Super Bowl spot?
Well, I think experience does mean something. And I think the fact that you have the Buffalo Bills almost going under the radar right now because everyone keeps jumping on, Drake May and the New England Patriots and what Mike Vrabel has done, which has been very impressive in a very short period of time. Or we've talked about with the Denver Broncos coming off an impressive win over the Cowboys, the LA Chargers being a big one. And, the Indianapolis Colts, maybe Jonathan Taylor's the MVP of the season. So there's a lot to be said at times to kind of just going through the season. But when it's playoff time and you've been there, you know what to expect. The pressure gets ramped up a little bit. It's different. It's different. The first time you get in there, rarely do you see a team that goes there for the first time with a relatively first time, with a new group of players, it's a different deal. It goes to another level, and when you've been there before, you know how to process that. You understand the sense of urgency, the sense of of the season coming to an end, and at times that pressure in itself, people respond differently. But when you've been there before, you realize that you've been there before. It's not a big deal. It's no different than what the regular season is. Easier said than done if you've never been there before. So I think experience is something. I think sometimes going under the radar and letting people question you is also a little bit more motivation when people say you can't do something. I know I was always looking for something to make every game personal, to make our journey personal. And when someone says that, we can't win in the playoffs, that's all I really wanted to hear, because that kind of just takes the pressure off. Oh, we can't? We'll see. We'll find out. So again, they have experienced people have been there for both these teams, and the fact that they're kind of both a little bit caught under the radar right now because of the Indianapolis, because of New England, Denver, the Chargers, whatever you want to talk about. That to me is also not a bad thing.
Coach, let me tell you the level of shock that I have that you tried to create a chip and put it on your team's shoulder, because I don't know. I think there are 32 coaches in the NFL, and I think they're all looking for that angle. I got one last one for you. The tush push has been such a big, controversy, topic of conversation. How angry are you that you didn't think of that? Because all I can imagine is Ben under center with Jerome pushing him ahead. I mean, I don't know that you would have needed to save that for 3rd and 4th down. You could have probably ran that for 6 yards a clip.
It's not a play I'm a fan of. I've gone on record as saying this publicly that it's a rugby play. It's a scrum. I think we need to get it out of our game. But listen, Ben didn't need to get anybody to push him. He was already 250 pounds, so he was fine by himself. Matter of fact, he would run around the corner. So and Ben didn't mind getting hit either. So, but if we had to put Jerome behind and push him, you're right. That's a lot of beef up there. But we had a pretty good offensive line, and I'd rather just hand the ball off to Jerome. I was pretty sure he could get me a yard.
Matt, you got one more for Coach?
No, that'll wrap it up. This has been so much fun having you come on our collaboration podcast here ahead of this one. I guess the final thing to say is, like, the most exciting part of the season for me is covering these games, because as you know,
Right.
when you have two elite quarterbacks like this, to be able to be in the building and watch them kind of battle it out, you never leave not having a ton of fun.
No, and I think both these guys they look forward to it as well. And I think it's like one of those things. I'm sure Josh is on the sideline, but he's watching Patrick. I think Patrick's on the sideline, probably looking at his tablet, but he's looking up at the board too to see what Josh is doing. So they kind of love this platform. They love this stage that they're both put on, and their levels of improvisation, they take it to another level. I think that's the thing that make both these guys great. Their ability to extend plays, to extend drives, to do the unthinkable, to make the pass that you shouldn't make, but they do anyway. But also playing within themselves. And one thing these guys do, they inspire everybody around them in that huddle, and they bring their team. They take their teams to another level. They're great leaders. They're humble. They're confident, and they look forward to challenges like that.
He is the Hall of Famer. Coach Cowher, thanks so much for taking the time and hanging out with us. Thank you for watching and listening to the BKL Makes Me Want to Shout show.